Chapter 1291. After exchanging some pleasantries, Dou sighed. I didn't think we would be reunited under these circumstances. Truth be told, I would much rather face you on a competition platform. Perhaps I would have the opportunity to set the record straight. Then, Dou couldn't help but chuckle as he spoke. Tang Wolin also smiled as he said, if you want a sparring match, then I'm happy to accept your challenge at any time. I also really miss the days when we competed against one another. We were all still very young at the time. Dou chuckled. Even now, you're still very young. Who would have thought that someone as young as you would be the Tang sect master? A slightly sharp tone crept into Dou voice as he spoke. Tang Wolin merely smiled and said, I have the seniors of the Tang sect to thank for my current position, and I only hope to reciprocate the Tang sect for their trust and kindness. May I ask what the Douluo Empire thinks of our collaboration, Your Highness? Dou replied, the negotiations can wait until you meet Father tomorrow. I'm not here to talk politics today. Tang Wolin raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. It sounds like the Douluo Empire isn't too concerned about this war. Dou smiled calmly in response. Do you think we should be worried? Tang Wolin replied, I see. In that case, is there still any need for me to meet His Majesty? Dou faltered slightly upon hearing this, clearly taken aback by Tang Wolin's domineering demeanor. He was hoping to gain a slight advantage for the negotiation to be held the next day by establishing a position of power over Tang Wolin, but he didn't think that Tang Wolin would respond so aggressively. You seem different from before. Dou quickly composed himself. Tang Wolin replied, I haven't actually changed much. I'm merely concerned that the Douluo Empire will struggle in the face of the federal army. Seeing as you clearly think that the empire is capable of defending itself, then it appears my concerns were unwarranted. Our Tang sect has forged an extremely close bond with the Douluo Empire, and the last thing we want to see is for the Douluo Empire to be negatively impacted by this war. However, I can now see that there's no need for such concerns, so I won't need to waste any of His Majesty's precious time. Dou said, you say you haven't changed, but you definitely weren't so overbearing in the past. Tang Wolin shook his head in response. You're misconstruing my words. I'm concerned, but not for the power of the Douluo Empire. Instead, I'm concerned about your current attitude. How about I show you something before we continue our discussion? Tang Wolin rose to his feet as he spoke, and at this point, he had already cast aside all pretenses of geniality. Dou also stood up and asked, so you're saying that what we're doing here is a waste of time? That's right, Tang Wolin replied without any hesitation. Perhaps you think the Douluo Empire is already sufficiently prepared for the war. In that case, there would be no point in continuing our discussion until I show you what I'm about to show you now. He walked out of the conference chamber as he spoke, and throughout this entire process, the smiling Douluo didn't utter even a single word. Tang Wolin had been able to address the situation in the Dou Spirit Empire in outstanding fashion, so he had full trust in Tang Wolin's ability to do the same here in the Douluo Empire. Dou and Tang Wolin were acquaintances to begin with, and that was why Dai Tianling had sent him to meet with Tang Wolin. However, neither Dou nor the smiling Douluo had anticipated that Tang Wolin would be acting in such an overbearing manner. One had to realize that the Tang sect was still just a sect, whereas Dou represented the entire empire. Whether this style of negotiation was appropriate or not would hinge entirely on what Tang Wolin was about to show Dou. Dou followed Tang Wolin to the drill ground in silence, but he was not in a very good mood. Even if he was one of Shrek's 7 monsters and the Tang sect master, he still couldn't compare with the rightful heir to the throne of the Douluo Empire, so it was only appropriate that Tang Wolin conceded a position of slight inferiority during the negotiation. However, Tang Wolin wasn't making any concessions, and was even threatening to call off the negotiations. Even if the Douluo Empire were to comply with the Tang sect's conditions in the end, such a style of negotiation would still leave a bitter taste in Dou mouth. There was already someone waiting for them at the drill ground. To put it more accurately, there was a black mecha standing at the center of the hall. The mecha was around 8 meters tall, and had a massive gun on its back. Dou glanced at the mecha before turning to Tang Wolin. This is what you wanted to show me? Tang Wolin nodded in response before making a hand signal toward the black mecha. The black mecha took the gun off its own back, and in the instant that it did so, powerful beings from the Imperial Holy Hall immediately positioned themselves in front of Dou merely brushed them off. There's no need to be so wary. This is the Tang sect. Tang Wolin was rather surprised by his composure, and he glanced at Dou with a hint of approval in his eyes. At this moment, another group of people made their way into the drill ground from another direction, and they were pushing something along with them. The first thing was a huge metal ball that was placed on one side of the drill ground. This was followed by 10 thick metal boards that were placed in front of the black mecha one after another at intervals of around 3 meters. Dou could already see that this was going to be a weapon demonstration. He turned to Tang Wolin, only to find that the latter was looking straight ahead with a serious expression. Soon, everything had been set up, and Jiang Wuyu made a hand signal to Tang Wolin to indicate that they were ready. Tang Wolin nodded before instructing, activate the protective barrier. Faint yellow light flashed, and the entire competition area was encompassed within a barrier of soft yellow light. The giant metal ball, which had a diameter of around 3 meters, was situated outside of the protective barrier. Tang Wolin turned to Dou and said, Your Highness, if you like, you can get your people to examine the structural integrity of those alloy boards in that alloy ball. Each alloy board possesses defensive prowess roughly equivalent to that of a yellow mecha, and all of these combined can roughly match the defensive prowess of a black mecha. Dou waved a hand, and someone immediately rushed away to examine the alloy structures. Meanwhile, Dou asked in a low voice, What exactly do you intend to show me? An experimental weapon? Even if these alloy boards possess defensive prowess comparable to that of a black mecha, it wouldn't be all that remarkable for a soul cannon with high penetrative power to tear through all of them. Tang Wolin replied, Please have patience, Your Highness. Everything will soon be revealed. Soon, the person that was examining the alloy structures returned and gave Dou a nod, indicating that Tang Wolin hadn't exaggerated the defensive properties of these structures. Tang Wolin raised a hand toward the black mecha. Get ready. The black mecha took a step forward, and its foot landed on the ground with a solid clang. It then raised the giant gun in its hands, aiming at the first alloy board while making some minor adjustments. A faint buzzing sound rang out from the giant gun, and dark blue light swirled as the black mecha made a hand signal toward Tang Wolin. Tang Wolin waved his right hand, and the black mecha immediately pressed the trigger. The giant gun shuddered slightly, and a beam of blue light surged through the air in a flash. The entire process was very fast, and before everyone knew it, it was already over. There was no resounding boom, only a faint buzzing sound had rung out, and the alloy boards in front of the huge gun remained completely unscathed. Dou and his entourage faltered upon seeing this before peculiar looks appeared on their faces. He had invited the prince here just to see this. Nothing had happened. Was there an error? Dou turned to Tang Wolin. There was no mockery in his voice nor his expression as he knew that a man of Tang Wolin's status wouldn't do something like this unless he had a proper reason. However, this error appeared to be quite a massive one. Chapter 1292. Tang Wolin shook his head before pointing into the distance. Only then did everyone recall that there was a metal ball that had been rolled into the drill ground. However, it was situated quite far away, and wasn't even inside the protective barrier, so they had automatically thought that it had nothing to do with what Tang Wolin wanted to show them. With the protective barrier in the way, it was rather difficult to see the metal ball, but now that the shot had been fired, the protective barrier was withdrawn, and everyone finally caught a clear glimpse of the alloy ball. The disdainful looks on the faces of all of the Imperial Soulmasters instantly stiffened, and they looked as if they had seen a ghost. A huge hole with a diameter of over 2 meters had been blasted into the metal ball. Strangely enough, the wall that was not far behind the metal ball remained completely unscathed. It was as if the core of the metal had spontaneously melted on its own. Dou was quite stunned to see this, but he still didn't really understand. What is this meant to show me? He asked. You don't get it? Tang Wolin asked in a calm manner. I'm afraid not. All right, there should be mecha pilots among your entourage, right? How about we get one of them to release their mecha and repeat that experiment? Tang Wolin suggested. Dou waved a hand, and a middle-aged mecha pilot standing beside him immediately raised an arm. A halo of light erupted from the bracelet on his wrist, and a beam of light surged forth before materializing a black mecha out of thin air. Do you need me to participate in the experiment? The mecha pilot asked. Not only was Dou completely perplexed, none of them had understood exactly what Tang Wolin was trying to show them. Tang Wolin replied, No need. Just place something that you think is quite solid and hard in your mecha's pilot room, then activate its automatic defense system to release its protective barrier. The mecha pilot was slightly hesitant. Will this experiment damage my mecha? To any high-grade mecha pilot, their mechas were like their second lives, so they definitely didn't want their mecha to be harmed in any way. Tang Wolin shook his head in response. It won't. If any damage is caused, I'll repay you by twofold. Having received that promise from Tang Wuling, the mecha pilot didn't say anything further. He rose up into the pilot room of his black mecha and placed a chunk of uncommon metal in there, then activated its automatic defense system. Once a mecha reached the black caliber, some simple functions could be completed remotely, such as protective barrier activation or opening and closing of the pilot room. A slightly warped transparent protective barrier was released by the black mecha, and a content look appeared on the mecha pilot's face. Every high-grade mecha pilot made sure to painstakingly fine-tune their own mecha, so he was very confident in his black mecha's defensive prowess. With its defenses fully activated, he was confident that it would be able to withstand even an attack from a tidal Douluo. Tang Wuling made another hand signal toward the black mecha in the distance, and on this occasion, it didn't need to make any further adjustments before firing off another shot. On this occasion, the beam of blue light was clearly weaker, and the buzzing sound also wasn't as loud as before. The targeted back mecha merely shuddered slightly before falling still again, and its protective barrier was still in place. The black mecha in the distance then put down its gun again, and the mecha pilot from the Douluo Empire turned to Tang Wuling with a skeptical look. That's it. Tang Wuling made an inviting hand gesture. Open your pilot room and have a look. The mecha pilot strode over to his mecha in a perplexed manner, then remotely deactivated the protective barrier before opening the pilot room. In the instant that the pilot room was opened, a plume of acrid smoke wafted out from within. At this point, the piece of uncommon metal that had been left on the pilot seat had already disappeared, and even the seat itself had been melted away. Tang Wuling said in a slightly apologetic manner, "My apologies. Our control wasn't up to scratch, and we damaged your pilot seat as well. Our tank sect will repay you for twice the cost of the seat." Everyone had failed to see the point of the first experiment, but now, the meaning was clear as day, and horrified looks appeared on all of their faces. All of the items used in the first experiment had been provided by the tank sect, so no matter what the effect had been, they could always raise suspicions or be skeptical. However, it was different on this occasion. The mecha belonged to the Douluo Empire, and its pilot was definitely someone who was trustworthy as well. They had witnessed the entire process during which he had fully activated the defense system of his mecha. So how had the inside of the mecha become like this? The most astonished one among them was naturally the mecha pilot himself. Just a minute ago, he had asked Tang Wuling whether his cooperation was required in the experiment. What would have happened to him had he been sitting in the pilot room? He would have most likely vanished along with that piece of metal in that chair. This was no longer just incredible. It was like a magic trick. Just what was that giant gun? Tang Wuling turned toward Dou Yuan, but didn't say anything, and merely appraised Dou Yuan's astonished expression in silence. This is what you wanted to show me. Dou Yuan's breathing was slightly labored. Even though he was constantly telling himself to calm down, he simply couldn't do so. The scenes he had just witnessed were far too incredible. It had gone beyond the realm of his imagination. This was definitely beyond the capabilities of any soul weapon that he knew of, and there were many implications behind this experiment. In the face of that giant gun, the black mecha's defenses were rendered completely null. No matter how powerful the mecha itself was, it would be useless if the mecha pilot were killed. What weapon is that? Dou Yuan asked in a slightly strained voice. Tang Wuling replied, "This is one of the Federation's newest weapons, and it's a federal secret. I'm sure that if we hadn't brought one here to show you, you'd be discovering its existence on a battlefield. This is a heavy iron laser gun. It doesn't possess much more offensive power than a normal super soul cannon, but its main advantage lies in its penetrative ability. It can pass through virtually all defenses, regardless of whether they're physical or energy-based, and the wielder can detonate the laser at any point to inflict as much damage as possible. Hence, it doesn't even need to damage the surface of an object to destroy everything within it. On top of that, it's effective against both mechas and battle armor. The federal military is already being equipped with this type of weapon, and it's only one of the newest weapons of the Federation that we know of. What do you think would happen if this type of weapon appeared in a large-scale mecha battle? Your Highness, what would happen?" This was an answer that everyone present could easily provide. The Douluo Empire's mecha legion would be crushed without being able to offer any resistance. The protective barriers that they took so much pride in would be rendered completely ineffective, and the mecha pilots would be reduced to dust. After that, their mechas would be captured by the federal military to be used against them. The faces of all of the mecha pilots present had turned deathly pale at the thought of this notion, and the soul masters weren't looking much better either. Battle armor could enhance soul masters to a tremendous extent, but that didn't mean that battle armor was more powerful than mechas. Mechas weren't all that inferior to battle armor when it came to power, but in comparison, battle armor was more compact and had greater synergy with the soul master. At the same time, a battle armor master could still use a mecha if they wanted to, which was why battle armor had always been ranked above mechas. However, who was to say that a weapon that would be so effective against mechas would be ineffective against battle armor? No one present was willing to volunteer themselves as an experimental guinea pig. Waves of shock were surging through Dou Yuan's heart. He had dared to try and establish a position of power over Tang Wuling as he was confident in the power of the Douluo Empire. Of course, they still wanted to receive the assistance of the Tang sect, but they didn't want to give up too much for that assistance. In particular, they didn't want to be overly restricted by the Tang sect as part of their agreement. Hence, Dou Yuan had come more so to test Tang Wuling than anything else. However, the test had yielded completely unexpected and downright terrifying results. Heavy iron laser gun. This was the first time he had ever heard of such a name, and there was no information in the Douluo Empire that indicated the existence of such a weapon. Dou Yuan's previously unwavering confidence in his own empire was beginning to sway, and he was at a loss for what to do. Chapter 1293. Tang Wuling said in a grim voice, "I'm sure you understand why I held such an attitude after seeing this heavy iron laser gun. I've come here with a great deal of sincerity. Our tank sectors indeed produce all types of soul weapons, but we champion peace as war will only result in the loss of countless innocent lives, and fuel the heinous individuals lurking in the shadows. After meeting you, I discovered that the Douluo Empire hasn't fully grasped the gravity of this imminent war. The three federal fleets and the Sea God Legion combined may not hold an advantage over the Douluo Empire in terms of the total number of troops, but in modern warfare, having more troops or even having more soul masters is no longer the key to ensuring victory. The key now is technology. If the Douluo Empire could compete with the Federation in technology, then it wouldn't have come to this continent in the first place." Tang Wuling's words were quite harsh and abrasive, and enraged looks appeared on the faces of all of the Douluo Empire powerful beings present, but they had to admit that Tang Wuling was right. The Douluo Empire was well aware of the disparity in soul technology between them and the Douluo Federation. It was just that during these past years, soul technology had also been advancing rapidly in the Douluo Empire, and they had made several major breakthroughs and were even threatening to catch up to the Douluo Federation in some areas. Only now, after witnessing this inconceivable heavy iron laser gun, did they realize that there was still an insurmountable gap between the two continents when it came to technology? It would be much easier to ignore the truth, but that would simply lead the empire to ruin. What about the Tang sect's technology? Can it compare with that of the Douluo Federation? Dou Yuan asked in a grim voice. Tang Wuling shook his head in response. There's no way the power of a sect could compare with that of an entire federation. However, our Tang sect has been accumulating power for 20,000 years. At the very least, we'll be able to assist the Douluo Empire to transcend this tribulation. In exchange, we're not asking for much. We merely request that the empire doesn't use these weapons to instigate a war. As for the price, our Tang sect definitely wouldn't go overboard, and I'm sure you have people who can analyze whether our prices are fair. Dou Yuan was naturally aware of this, but even if the Tang sect didn't charge unfair prices, it would still amount to an astronomical sum. Furthermore, if they were to agree to the Tang sect's conditions, then that would bind them together with the Tang sect, which would inevitably make them oppose some other powers. Can your Tang sect get these heavy iron laser guns? Dou Yuan asked. Tang Wuling shook his head in response. We won't be able to get them in bulk, and following our research, we discovered that these weapons are being guarded extremely rigorously by the Federation due to their importance. Any attempt to disassemble them would result in self-destruction of the weapon. We've only brought one of these weapons here on this occasion, and we won't be able to provide it to the Empire. I'm not sure if you heard about what happened in the Dou Spirit Empire not long ago. Our Tang sect officially declared war on the Spirit Pagoda, and the reason for that is very simple. The Spirit Pagoda has colluded with evil soul masters, and that has erased the final trace of hope we had in them. As such, we had no choice but to turn against them. Dou Yuan had naturally already heard of such an astonishing incident. In order to oppose the Douluo Federation, the Douluo Empire had always kept up good relations with the Dou Spirit Empire, and the Dou Spirit Empire's royal family had informed them of everything, including their decision to collaborate with the Tang sect. It was exactly because of this that the Douluo Empire Empire was even more reluctant to let Tang Wuling continue to take the lead. I think I understand what you're trying to say, Sect Master. I'll pass on everything I've seen here to my father, and he'll make the final decision. For now, I'll be taking my leave. There was no point in staying here any longer. After witnessing the true power of this heavy iron laser gun, he was very keen to return to the Imperial Palace to discuss what he had seen. Firstly, he had to inquire into the Imperial Research Center about whether such a weapon could possibly exist. A weapon that could kill black mecha pilots and even powerful battle armor masters in an instant was enough to turn the tide of an entire war. The Douluo Empire had been very confident as they championed power and had a huge population of soul masters and soul engineers, all of whom received absolute support from the Empire. They believed that even if the Douluo Empire was inferior to the Federation in terms of the total number of top-tier powerful beings, the disparity wouldn't be by much. Furthermore, the powerful beings of the Federation definitely weren't as united as those of the Douluo Empire. The advantage of a monarchy was that it gave those in power the ability to bestow upon its officials many things that a Federation wouldn't be able to. This naturally made it a lot easier to encourage cohesion and loyalty. The smiling Douluo and Tang Wuling accompanied Dai Yuan and his entourage to the front entrance, and only after they had departed did the smiling Douluo turn to Tang Wuling with an expression of approval. That was splendidly done, Sect Master. That was the first time even I have ever seen such a weapon, let alone His Highness. Is this weapon really able to breach the defenses of all black mechas? Tang Wuling nodded in response. Of course, someone from that entourage of Imperial powerful beings would have definitely noticed if we were trying to play tricks on them. The smiling Douluo's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. In that case, even if we achieve our objective, the Douluo Empire may still be unable to withstand an invasion from the Federation. With this type of super weapon at their disposal, the Federation was virtually unstoppable. After all, even black mechas were no match for these weapons. What could possibly stand in their way? Tang Wuling smiled and said, "These heavy iron laser guns are indeed extremely powerful, but they're not as unstoppable as you think. Firstly, it only has an effective range of 1 kilometer, and a black mecha has to be within a range of 500 meters for the weapon to be effective against it. Most importantly, his lips trembled slightly, and only the smiling Douluo could hear what he said next. Upon hearing Tang Wuling's explanation, a peculiar look immediately appeared on Hu Jie's face. I see, you really are something else, Sect Master. Haha, everyone says that I have a sly heart beneath my smiling facade, but I'm no match for you, Sect Master. Tang Wuling smiled and said, I merely showed them the truth, and none of what I said was a lie. What more can they ask from me? Hu Jie sighed. It'll all be down to His Majesty's decision tomorrow. Then, he's most likely not going to fold so easily. He has a very headstrong personality, and he may not choose to comply even if he's aware of how powerful his enemy is. So the negotiation method you used on His Highness definitely can't be replicated tomorrow. Otherwise, there's a good chance that he'll decide to take a risk rather than comply with our Tang sect. Tang Wuling nodded in response. This was a very important point that had just been raised by the smiling Douluo. In reality, he was also rather concerned about how the king would react to this situation. It would be best to take care of everything as quickly as possible as no one knew exactly when the war would break out. It had already been 4 months since they had left the Federation, and according to the information they'd received from the Dou Empire, the military docks near Spicy City have all been placed under complete lockdown, making it impossible for them to see the situation inside. All of the Federation's satellites and surveillance devices had also been prohibited from roaming over that area of the ocean. It was quite clear that even the boundless ocean Douluo had been unable to prevent this war from taking place, and everything was still progressing. It seemed to only be a matter of time before the federal army was deployed. Under these urgent circumstances, he naturally wanted to complete this mission as soon as possible so they would have the most time to prepare, thereby maximizing their chances of avoiding this war. Boss, do you think the Monster 8 Kings will challenge us for a rematch? That would be great. I've always been one to hold grudges, she said with a sly smile. They were younger than the Monster 8 Kings, and even though they had secured the final victory during the tournament, they had been reduced to an extremely sorry state. If it weren't for the final miraculous turnaround from Tang Wuling and Gu Yue, they would have lost. After the passage of so many years, the Monster 8 Kings would have definitely improved, but Shrek 7 monsters were still extremely confident, nonetheless, especially when they had such a powerful captain to lead them. Tang Wuling shot a glance at him. We're here to discuss important matters. There's no time for your personal grudges here. Besides, they didn't exactly have a good time during the match, either. Thinking back, he had almost severed Fox King Su Mu's tails, so there were most likely grudges being held on both sides. Chapter 1294. However, following the passage of so many years and with the new responsibilities that had been placed on his shoulders, those comparatively trivial matters no longer mattered to Tang Wuling. Long Yue was once his rival and target, but now, his target was truly the heavens. Up above in the heavens, his birth parents were still waiting for him to go and find them. He had to become a limit Douluo as soon as possible. Only by breaking through his limits could he gain access to the coordinates that would be required to find them. The survival of his foster parents was all but assured, but at the same time, his connection with his birth parents had also been severed. However, as long as there was still hope, he would never give up. The pilot room of the Black Mecha opened, and Long Yakshu jumped down in a graceful manner before striding over to Tang Wuling. Back when Tang Wuling had sought her out in the morning to prepare this experiment, she already knew that he was preparing to bluff Dai Yuan, and from the looks of it, his plan had worked quite well. Then again, the heavy iron laser gun truly was a formidable weapon that had even managed to severely wound the likes of their lord. Tang Wuling smiled and said, "Thanks for your hard work." Long Yakshu replied, "I'm glad to be of assistance." Peculiar looks appeared on the faces of Shrek's 6 monsters upon hearing their exchange. Long Yuexi definitely wasn't the first woman after Gu Yuna to have fallen in love with Tang Wuling, and she most likely wasn't going to be the last one. Unfortunately for everyone else, Tang Wuling simply wasn't the promiscuous type, and they could only take pity on Long Yakshu. Go back and have a good rest, everyone. We're going to be meeting the Emperor of the Douluo Empire tomorrow, and that will be the most important part of our journey, so we have to make ample preparations. The Douluo Empire revered power above all else, so everyone was naturally aware of what Tang Wuling meant when he told them to make preparations. After staying on a submarine for so long, they were bored out of their minds, and the prospect of a battle was making them very excited. Sect Master, allow me to introduce to you the current situation and some of the important members of our Tang sect. I'm sure that information will be helpful to your negotiations. I think there's a very good chance that the negotiation will go smoothly, so we need to prepare some other things in advance. Tang Wuling nodded in response. If a war really does break out, then the Douluo Empire will be the key. If the Federation attacks the Dou Empire first, then the Douluo Empire must provide them with reinforcements right away. If the Douluo Empire is attacked first, then it must withstand the invasion, and in the best case scenario, intimidate the federal army to the point of retreat. It is indeed time to make some preparations. Aside from the weapons that we brought along with us, our Tang sect has also brought them some resources that they can use when required. Of course. Please come with me, Sect Master. The next day. The previous day had been quite hectic, and Tang Wuling had only returned to his room late at night, but after a night's rest, he was fully reinvigorated. After taking a shower, he put on an antiquated robe that represented his identity as the Tang Sect Master, and he prepared himself for the most important part of this trip. The Blood Dragon squad stayed behind, and aside from the personnel from the Tang Sect, Tang Wuling was accompanied by only Shrek's 6 monsters, as well as Sima Jinkai and Arahang. With Sima Jinkai by his side, Tang Wuling would be able to unleash even greater power through their soul fusion skill. The Tang Sect motorcade drove out of the headquarters. Their privileges were immediately made very apparent as there was not a single vehicle on the wide roads. Furthermore, there were soldiers standing on either side of the road to ensure a smooth journey. All of the Tang Sect vehicles were custom made, and Tang Wuling was seated with his eyes closed in the second car with Hu Jie. This was going to be a very important step to deciding whether war would descend upon this continent. The Imperial Palace was very heavily guarded, and all of the cars were stopped after reaching the entrance of the palace. From there onward, they would have to continue on foot. Dai Yuan and some other members of the Imperial family were waiting for them. The Emperor himself naturally wasn't among them. After all, Tang Wuling was only the Tang sect master, so there was still quite a disparity between him and the ruler of an entire empire. The fact that the rightful heir to the throne had come out to welcome him in person was already an honor of the highest order. For some reason, Tang Wuling couldn't help but feel that Dai Yuan was looking at him in a rather peculiar manner. Your Highness, Tang Wuling greeted with a nod. The smile on Dai Yuan's face widened even further, and he said in a very hospitable manner, "Please come with me, Sect Master Tang." Tang Wuling was rather taken aback by Dai Yuan's rather excessively benign demeanor. Ever since he had first met Dai Yuan, this was the first time that he had been so amiable toward him. Of course, this was a good start. The two of them strode side by side, while everyone else trailed along behind them, and even the smiling Douluo made sure to follow along half a step behind the duo. Dai Yuan asked, "Sect Master Tang, what do you think of our Douluo Empire?" Tang Wuling replied, "I think it's a very good place. The Douluo Empire focuses more on the development of soul masters and individual power, which prompts many soul masters to work harder in their cultivation. Furthermore, I can see many aspects of traditional culture here that have already disappeared from the Federation, and I'm a big fan of that." Dai Yuan nodded in response. Indeed, there are many things in the Douluo Federation that only came after the continental clash. The Douluo continent hadn't always been as large as it was now. It was only after two continents had collided due to continental shift that the current Douluo continent had come into existence. At the time, the other continent had been known as the Sun Moon continent. The Sun Moon continent had plentiful resources, but far fewer soul masters. However, they were very advanced in soul technology, and the merging of the two continents had brought a revolution to the Douluo continent. Regardless of whether it was the Douluo continent or the current Dou Spirit continent, they were inhabited solely by the natives of the Douluo continent, whereas the Douluo Federation was a melting pot of many groups of people, including Douluo continent natives and people from the Sun Moon continent. The Douluo Empire and Dou Spirit Empire had opposed the people of the Sun Moon continent precisely due to their racial differences, and that was why the Douluo Empire had moved to the Douluo continent in the end. Over 10,000 years ago, soul masters had been the most revered beings on the Douluo continent, but with the advancements in technology since then, soul engineers and mecha pilots had slowly taken the ascendancy. It was undeniable that the inventions of mechas and soul tools had allowed normal people to attain previously unachievable levels of destructive power, but it was also exactly because of this soul masters were no longer as revered as before. Hence, the total number of soul masters, particularly high-grade ones, had constantly been decreasing in the Douluo Federation. Only after becoming a soul sage could one be considered to be a high-grade soul master, and this required a long and arduous process of cultivation, as well as a high level of cultivation aptitude. In contrast, the process would be far faster if some talented soul masters were to become soul engineers and take some shortcuts to elevate their soul power and become mecha masters. This process would at least be twice as fast as that of becoming a high-grade soul master, and there wouldn't be too much of a disparity between the combat prowess of the two. Hence, the trend in the Federation was one where soul engineers and soul technology were being developed as a priority. In doing so, they hoped to be able to conquer other habitable planets to find new homes for the human race. Hence, even though the Spirit Pagoda held control over all soul spirits, the Federal Parliament didn't really pay that much heed. As technology continued to advance, the role that powerful soul masters played would continue to diminish. Chapter 1295. Many federal scientists had already stated that technology would definitely replace the occupation of soul masters in the future, and at that point, they would become completely redundant. In any case, soul beasts were already virtually extinct, and research and development in soul spirits had also reached a bottleneck. With sufficient cutting-edge technology to enhance one's powers, who would still bother to cultivate? This viewpoint was even affecting the Dou Spirit Empire to a certain extent. They were at a huge disadvantage in terms of soul technology, so they had been constantly working toward developing their soul technology in the hope of catching up to the other two continents. In contrast, the Douluo Empire assigned greater importance to traditional values, and reference toward individual power was a deep-rooted part of its culture. Even in its research and development into soul technology, it was mostly to enhance individual combat prowess. They still firmly believed that if a single person were powerful enough, they would be able to turn the tide of an entire war. Perhaps this was because the Douluo Empire had witnessed Tang San's miraculous heroics in his battle against the Spirit Hall, as well as Hua Yua's legendary feat of forcing the Sun Moon Empire into retreat on his own. However, it was exactly because of this that Dai Yuan had been so stunned after witnessing the power of the heavy iron laser gun. If technology in the Federation had already outstripped that of their empire to this extent, then how were they supposed to even stand a chance in the imminent war? The Imperial Palace was extremely lavish and grandiose, even though the Douluo Empire had also already progressed into the modern age of soul technology. The guards in front of the Imperial Palace still wore antiquated suits of armor to pay homage to their traditions. This Imperial Palace was virtually no different from the palace of the Douluo Empire from 10,000 years ago. It was extremely spacious with a ceiling that was over 40 meters tall, and just being inside it struck one with an indescribable sense of pressure. On either side of the hall stood the officials of the Douluo Empire, and it was no coincidence that they had been gathered on the same day that Dai Tianling had been scheduled to meet Tang Wuling. The smiling Douluo had already told Tang Wuling in advance to expect this, so he was mentally prepared. He looked up to find a staircase consisting of a dozen or so steps at the conclusion of the red carpet on the ground before him. At the top of the staircase was what appeared to be an independent miniature city with dozens of guards and servants surrounding a man seated on a throne. The man wore a set of golden robes with the diagram of a fierce white tiger embroidered on its surface. The white tiger was the symbol of the Douluo Empire, and the direct lineal martial soul of the imperial family, so the empire had always revered tigers. Dai Tianling was a powerful soul master himself, so the passage of time hadn't left many traces on his physical appearance. The last time Tang Wuling had seen this emperor was from afar, and even when the awards were being presented, he hadn't paid any particular attention to this man. Now that he was meeting the emperor again, he was struck by a rather peculiar feeling. He was back, but he was in a completely different position compared to in the past. Never did he think that he would be able to negotiate with the ruler of an empire as equals in only his early 20s. There were two chairs beside Dai Tianling's throne, and they were the only ones on this independent platform aside from the throne. There was an elderly man occupying one of the chairs with his eyes closed, and he seemed to be sound asleep. Tang Wuling was not very fond of this old man. He was the principal of Monster Academy and a limit Douluo. Back when Long Yue had lost control and tried to kill Tang Wuling, this man had displayed no intention of stepping in whatsoever. If it weren't for Tang Wuling's incredible regenerative abilities and the timely intervention from Yu Yi, he most likely wouldn't even be standing here today. Tang Wuling recalled this man's name very clearly. It was NC. He was able to sit beside the emperor not just because he was a limit Douluo, but also because he was the imperial teacher. The current emperor had studied and cultivated under his guidance for a very long time, so he had a great deal of respect for NC. However, what caught Tang Wuling's attention the most was the person sitting on the other side of Dai Tianling. This was a woman in a long palatial dress with her hair organized in an immaculate fashion indicative of an unmarried noblewoman. There was an intricate phoenix with a pair of exuberant eyes and its wings spread open embroidered on the dress, and the woman wearing the dress had a pair of large bright eyes that had left a strong impression on Tang Wuling on more than one occasion. Their eyes met, and Tang Wuling's determined gaze wavered ever so slightly. There was no way that he wouldn't have any feelings toward a woman like her. At the very least, he had been touched by her persistence. She had once traveled across the ocean to find him in Shrek Academy, only to be rejected by him, and for that, Tang Wuling was still feeling very apologetic. Dai Yuna was looking back at him with a series of complex emotions in her eyes. There was a hint of anticipation, but that was far outweighed by a look of sorrow. The last their eyes had met was during the Sea God Fate matchmaking convention. Since then, the Sea God's island had already disappeared, yet they were reunited here in the Imperial Palace of the Douluo Empire. Fate really did work in strange and unexpected ways sometimes. Dai Yuan quickly stepped forward before extending a respectful bow. Your Majesty, I've brought Sect Master Tang Wuling here. Even though the Douluo Empire still abided closely to traditions, there were still many changes that had been made. For example, officials no longer needed to kowtow to the emperor, and one of the main reasons why the Dai family was so revered by its people. One had to realize that even the Spirit Douluo was a member of the Dai family. In the Federation, the spirit Douluo had always been known as Hua Yuao, but here in the Douluo Empire, his name had always been Dai Yuao. He had the blood of the imperial family flowing through his veins, but unfortunately, he hadn't inherited the white tiger martial soul. Dai Tianling nodded at Tang Wuling in an expressionless manner. Thank you for coming all this way to our Star Dou Empire, Sect Master Tang. Please take a rest, and we'll begin our negotiations once I finish addressing my officials. Thank you, Your Majesty. Tang Wuling extended a slight bow of gratitude. Someone quickly carried a chair over to Tang Wuling, and he took a seat in front of all of the officials, just one step away from the platform up ahead. The smiling Douluo was given a seat on the other side, while Shrek's 6 monsters were offered seats behind Tang Wuling. Dai Tianling said, "Let's continue. How is the mobilization of our troops coming along, Minister of War?" One of the officials below the platform strode forward and said, "Your Majesty, everything is going smoothly. Our Empire's 1st, 3rd, and 7th legions have been deployed to the borders, and the mobilization of the Spirit Ice Fleet and White Tiger Fleet is also complete. Good. If you encounter any problems in resource distribution, then turn to the Ministry of Revenue for timely assistance. Ensure that our troops on the front lines are in the best possible condition to face a war should it arise." "Yes, Your Majesty," another official said in a respectful voice as he also stepped forward. After that, they discussed some general affairs, and Tang Wuling listened in silence. All of the officials of the Douluo Empire struck him as being very efficient and concise, and as the Emperor, Dai Tianling mostly just had to approve the courses of action being presented to him. This was the main advantage of a monarchy. However, this was still very different from a traditional monarchy as the officials clearly had more speaking rights, but they still had to maintain a certain level of respect toward a royal family. On the surface, the court appeared to be extremely cohesive and well run, and it was no wonder that the Douluo Empire was so confident in itself. Tang Wuling sat in his chair and looked straight forward, not taking any further glances at Dai Yuna. He didn't seem to be tuning out everything around him, nor did he seem to be listening very carefully. Everything about him appeared to be very natural. At this moment, NC slowly opened his eyes, and his gaze settled on Tang Wuling. His eyes were slightly murky, but the complex emotions within them were still quite clear to see. Back during the tournament, he hadn't stepped in to save Tang Wuling from Lon Yue precisely because he had identified Tang Wuling's latent potential at the time. As it turned out, his judgment had been correct. No more than 7 years following the tournament, he had reappeared before them as the Tang Sect Master. It was undoubtedly the case that the higher-ups of the Tang Sect were even more aware of his potential than NC was. When NC first heard the news that Tang Wuling had become the Tang Sect Master, he had been given a massive shock as well. This was the Tang Sect Master, the representative of the number 1 sect on the continent. Chapter 1296. No matter how much latent potential Tang Wuling had, he was still only a young man in his early 20s. His powers may have earned him some recognition, but would he really be able to handle the enormous pressure on his shoulders and manage the Tang Sect appropriately? There was no one to answer that question for him, but nonetheless, this was the decision that had been made by the 2 Tang Sect Douluo Palace Masters. Furthermore, after becoming the Tang Sect Master, Tang Wuling had immediately been sent off to the 2 neighboring empires for negotiations on behalf of the Tang Sect. This was undoubtedly the most important matter that the Tang Sect had had to attend to in many years, so this was a clear indication of just how much the higher-ups of the Tang Sect trusted this young man. Of course, they were unaware of the fact that the heartless Douluo had only made the decision after witnessing Tang Wuling being blessed by the plane. To put it in simpler terms, the fortune of the entire planet was with Tang Wuling. It would not be incorrect to describe him as the child of destiny, and if they were to miss out on him due to their reluctance to bestow upon him greater responsibilities, then they would definitely be left ruining their decision. Don't forget that Tang Wuling was also a part of Shrek Academy. Even with how close Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect were, they still weren't the same organization. In these tumultuous times, Shrek Academy had made Tang Wuling the new Sea God's Pavilion Master, so the Tang Sect naturally had to offer him a corresponding position. Otherwise, he would inevitably be more inclined to side with the Academy, even if it was only on a subconscious basis. NC closed his eyes again. Tang Wuling was now no longer someone who could simply be killed off. The Empire couldn't afford to sour its relationship with the Tang Sect over just a single person, so they could only leave him be and watch as he continued to develop. It was undoubtedly the case that he would become a limit Douluo in the future, and with such a young limit Douluo among their ranks, the Tang Sect's future would be all but assured for at least the next century. As he was discussing the Empire's affairs with his officials, Dai Tianling had also been keeping an eye on Tang Wuling. The white-robed Tang Wuling was quite a sight to behold, but there was no powerful aura emanating from his body. Dai Tianling couldn't help but internally praise him for his handsome looks and steadfast demeanor. In particular, it was very remarkable that Tang Wuling was able to remain so calm and collected in such a high-pressure setting. Only after 2 hours did the proceedings conclude, and at this point, many of the officials were beginning to look rather weary, but Dai Tianling was still as energetic as ever. The officials departed, and he strode down from the platform, followed closely by NC. "My apologies for making you wait for so long, Sect Master Tang." The serious expression on Dai Tianling's face had been replaced by a very warm smile. "It's only right that you prioritize your Empire's affairs first above all else. Your Majesty, do you need some rest before we begin?" Tang Wuling asked with a smile. His demeanor was quite respectful, but not overtly so. Dai Tianling chuckled. "I'm no longer a young man, but I'm not old enough to require a midday nap just yet. Come, let's go take a seat in the rear palace." It seemed that Dai Tianling's attitude was quite a positive one. At the very least, he didn't seem to be opposed to Tang Wuling. The smiling Douluo smiled and said, "If you're no longer considered a young man, then what a brother NC and I supposed to be?" NC glanced at the smiling Douluo before countering. "Don't compare yourself to me. We're not the same age." Indeed, NC was over 30 years older than Hu Jie. Hu Jie chuckled. "You may be older than me, but there's a decent chance that you'll live longer than me." Tang Wuling was rather surprised by the casual interaction taking place between Hu Jie and NC. It seemed that they were on very good terms with one another. NC shook his head in a resigned manner and didn't say anything further. Dai Tianling chuckled. "I truly envy the friendship between you two. I may be the Emperor, but what I wouldn't give for a good friend that I can confide in. Sect Master Tang, please follow me." Tang Wuling and the others were led to the rear palace by Dai Tianling, where tea and snacks had already been prepared for them. The rear palace was just as grandiose and spectacular, and Dai Tianling sat down on the main seat. NC took a seat by his side again, while Tang Wuling and Dai Yuan sat across from him. Dai Yuna was still standing behind Dai Tianling, and she hadn't uttered even a single word to Tang Wuling, but her eyes had never strayed away from him, either. Dai Tianling smiled and asked, "Are you well rested after your journey, Sect Master Tang?" Tang Wuling replied, "I'm very well rested. Thank you for asking, Your Majesty. I'm well aware of the purpose of your trip, Sect Master Tang. I've seen all of the conditions proposed, and most of them are very reasonable. The Douluo Empire has also always been very grateful for the support of the Tang Sect, but there are some conditions that I wish to negotiate." "Oh, which conditions are you referring to, Your Majesty?" Tang Wuling asked in a calm manner. Dai Tianling smiled and said, "Setting that aside for now, do you have any additional requests on top of these conditions, Sect Master Tang?" Tang Wuling's heart stirred upon hearing this, and he replied, "Our Tang Sect only hopes to prevent this war and the loss of innocent lives. We encountered members of the Holy Spirit cult in the Dou Spirit Empire, and they will stand to benefit the most from a war as they can use all death and suffering to their advantage. The Holy Spirit cult has become more and more active of late, and they've been responsible for several major terrorist attacks in the Federation. It's quite clear that they're planning something big, and now that we can confirm that the Spirit Pagoda is colluding with them, that makes things even more troublesome. Hence, we can't allow them to benefit from this war." Dai Tianling's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. "Are you implying that members of the Holy Spirit cult have infiltrated our empire as well?" Tang Wuling nodded without any hesitation. "That's for sure. They're hiding in the shadows and waiting for the commencement of the war. The higher the death toll, the more they'll benefit, and the Holy Spirit cult will only be more powerful than we imagine. I've encountered 2 of the Holy Spirit Douluo's 4 heavenly monarchs, and one of them is a rank 97 hyper Douluo, while the other is at rank 98 soul power. Furthermore, there are at least 5 evil soul masters more powerful than them in the Holy Spirit cult, including the blood demon that we were made aware of in the Dou Spirit Empire." At the mention of the blood demon, a cold look crept into Tang Wuling's eyes, and his calm aura shifted ever so slightly. The change lasted only for an instant, but NC still caught onto it, and a hint of astonishment appeared in his eyes. Tang Wuling had hidden his powers very well earlier, and even he had failed to detect the fact that Tang Wuling had already reached the spirit domain realm. This discovery struck NC with a hint of incredulity. It had only been a few years since he had last been on the Douluo continent. How much spiritual power had he possessed at the time? How had he made such astonishing progress progress in just these short few years. Even the smiling Douluo had only recently reached the spirit domain realm and was yet to materialize a spiritual domain. Could it be that this young man had encountered some kind of miraculous opportunity? NC was suddenly struck by the realization that he had to reevaluate this young man. It was quite clear that he was here, not just for his potential, but also for the level of power he had already achieved. This wasn't the first time that Dai Tianling had heard of the Holy Spirit cult, but it was still a relatively unfamiliar organization to the Douluo Empire. This was because the Holy Spirit cult still hadn't made any major moves in the Douluo Empire, so they hadn't really made their presence known. Furthermore, it was not a bad thing for the Douluo Empire that the Holy Spirit cult was acting as a thorn in the side of the Douluo Federation. Of course, that was only under the premise that the threat of the Holy Spirit cult didn't spread to the Douluo Empire as well. Chapter 1297. Tang Wuling nodded with a grim expression. The Holy Spirit cult was able to destroy our Shrek Academy and the Tang sect headquarters, and they definitely have the power to replicate these heinous feats here on the Douluo continent. He cast his gaze around the rear palace as he spoke, and it wasn't difficult to read between the lines and see what he was implying. Dai Yuan couldn't help but interject. Aren't you being a little too pessimistic, Sex Master Tang? Even if the Holy Spirit cult has infiltrated our empire, their main forces should still be in the Douluo Federation. Tang Wuling replied, it's much better to be safe than sorry. The Holy Spirit cult benefits the most from chaos and destruction. Can you expect me to believe that they played no role in instigating this war? According to the latest news, the Federation has cut off its entire coastline from radar detection, and also began to monitor large areas of the coast. No one knows when the federal fleets will be deployed, so the situation is very urgent, and I implore you to make a decision quickly, Your Majesty. He had already said everything he needed to say to Dai Yuan the day before, and now, it was up to the Emperor to make his decision, or to propose conditions for the Tang sect to consider. The Tang sect was providing weapons, but it wasn't just a weaponry merchant. The main distinction was that the usage of these weapons had to be approved by the Tang sect, and they had to be used only when necessary. This meant that they couldn't be used to instigate a war, and in order to enforce these regulations, all of the weapons had passcode locks that only the Tang sect could unlock. Thus, the Douluo Empire was purchasing these weapons, but the usage rights weren't actually in their hands, and that was quite a heavy restriction. Otherwise, if the deal simply consisted of the Tang sect selling power soul weapons with no strings attached, then both empires would have agreed in a heartbeat. Dai Tianling appraised Tang Wuling with an intense gaze, and said, Sex Master Tang, the conditions proposed by your Tang sect are rather difficult for us to accept, but a potential war is imminent, and we really do need these weapons, so how about we make a bet? Dai Tianling maintained a smile as he spoke. A bet? Tang Wuling was struck by a sense of absurdity upon hearing this. These words were being spoken by the ruler of a major empire, and the empire in question could be in great peril soon. Despite what he was thinking, Tang Wuling's expression remained calm. A bet? What would you like to bet, Your Majesty? Dai Tianling replied, I'm sure you know which conditions our empire is reluctant to accept, so we'll make our bet based on that. If we lose, then we'll accept all of your conditions. On top of that, we'll throw in an additional 10% on top of the prices proposed by your Tang sect. If we win, then you have to remove the restriction clause. Tang Wuling's brows furrowed tightly upon hearing this. Your Majesty, this isn't child's play. Dai Tianling replied, of course not. I fully intend to do as I say. Tang Wuling was rather bemused. That's not what I mean, Your Majesty. I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say. Dai Tianling said in an indifferent manner, my apologies, Sex Master Tang, but this is my final decision. How about you listen to the conditions of the bet first? Alternatively, there's another option. If you can satisfy a certain condition of mine, not only will we fully accept the deal proposed by your Tang sect, we'll even throw in an extra 20% on the total price as a present to you. 20%? That didn't sound like much, but one had to realize the total price for such a large batch of soul weapons was already an astronomical sum to begin with. The Tang sect was preparing to provide the Douluo Empire with 4 times the amount of weapons they had supplied to the Dou Spirit Empire, and the total cost was more than enough to fully equip an entire mega legion. Even the smiling Douluo's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. He was quite close with the Imperial family, but he didn't know what the Imperial family intended to do, either, and only now was he able to hear the Imperial family's plan. This extra 20% could help the Tang sect purchase an enormous amount of additional resources from the 2 empires. What's your condition, Your Majesty? Tang Wuling wasn't allowing himself to become overexcited by this prospect. The fact that Dai Tianling was willing to promise an additional 20% was an indication of just how rigorous the condition was going to be. Dai Tianling smiled and replied, it's not a very rigorous condition, and the Tang sect won't even need to sacrifice anything. The most important thing here is you. He turned to Dai Yuna as he spoke, and a sense of foreboding instantly welled up in Tang Wuling's heart. Sure enough, what Dai Tianling said next confirmed his suspicions. Yuna is my only daughter, and I've cherished her for her entire life. She can't inherit the throne from me, but everyone who's close to me knows that she's more important than any of my sons in my heart. Even though she's a princess, I chose to accept her disregard for the rules of the royal family, and I even allowed her to be exempt from entering a political marriage. This is all because she is the most important person in my life. I'm not just an emperor, I'm also a father, and as a father, all I want is for my precious daughter to be happy. You two were already acquainted the last time you came to the Douluo Empire. I don't know what happened between the two of you, but I know one thing is for sure. My daughter definitely has feelings for you. Sex Master Tang, if you're willing to become my son-in-law, then we'll be a family, and our deal will naturally go ahead without any issues. Furthermore, you don't need to stay in our Douluo Empire. All that I ask is that you make my daughter your principal wife. After that, wherever you choose to go, the Douluo Empire will forever be your staunchest supporter. Tang Wuling was at a complete loss, and Dai Yuna had turned away to hide the deep blush on her face. She had sought out Long Yue and NC to convince her father together, all for this opportunity. If Yuna had been by Tang Wuling's side, then perhaps she wouldn't have done this. However, she wasn't. Yet Tang Wuling was with all of his other friends, so there was a very good chance that something had happened between them. Dai Yuna was well aware that a man as exceptional as Tang Wuling definitely had more than 1 or 2 pursuers, so perhaps this was her final chance, and she wasn't going to give up on this chance no matter what. She had always been very willful and determined ever since she was a child, and she certainly wasn't going to back down when it came to love. She was determined to find someone she loved, rather than someone who loved her. Shrek's 6 monsters were also all stunned by this turn of events. They had all witnessed Dai Yuna's confession to Tang Wuling during the Sea God Fate matchmaking convention, but never did they think that the Emperor would propose such an inexplicable condition during such an important and serious meeting. However, now that they thought about it, this was a brilliant move that was killing multiple birds with one stone. If Tang Wuling were to marry Dai Yuna, then that would mean that the Tang sect master and Sea God's pavilion master had married the princess of the Douluo Empire. With Tang Wuling's current status, he was definitely a worthy match for the princess. If this were to eventuate, then the bond between the Douluo Empire and the Tang sect would be further strengthened and far outstrip the bond between the Tang sect and the Dou Spirit Empire. Even though the Tang sect had been keeping a low profile in the Federation, the Douluo Empire was well aware of just how much power the Tang sect still had up its sleeve. If the Tang sect were willing to unconditionally support the Douluo Empire, then it certainly wouldn't be impossible for them to catch up to the Douluo Federation in the future. As such, this was a meticulously thought out plan, and certainly not a spur-of-the-moment decision. Furthermore, even if Tang Wuling were removed from his position in the Tang sect following the marriage, he was still someone with the potential to become a limit Douluo. If his daughter could marry a limit Douluo, then their empire would have the support of another limit Douluo. This was already a fantastic arrangement in itself. Hence, no matter how the situation was looked at, a marriage between Tang Wuling and Dai Yuna would be brilliant for the Douluo Empire. On top of that, Dai Yuna was also head over heels for Tang Wuling, so his daughter's happiness would also be ensured if this marriage could be arranged. As such, it didn't take much to convince Dai Tianling to propose this condition. Chapter 1298. A smile had also appeared on Dai Yuan's face. He had once faced Tang Wuling in battle, and he was well aware of Tang Wuling's potential and fighting qualities. The last time he was here on the Douluo continent, Dai Yuan had thought that he wasn't worthy of his sister, but now, the situation was completely different. Tang Wuling's powers and his status as the Tang sect master made him more than worthy of securing Dai Yuna's hand in marriage. The smiling Douluo clearly had no idea about the history between Tang Wuling and Dai Yuna, which made sense, considering there was no reason for Tang Wuling to have divulged this information to him. As such, he was initially stunned by this proposal before a smile quickly also appeared on his face. With his experience in wiles, he was naturally able to see just how smart this decision from Dai Tianling was, and on top of that, this wasn't a bad thing for the Tang sect, either. The Tang sect was being severely suppressed in the Federation, so it needed more support as well. If their sect master could marry the princess of the Douluo Empire, then that would undoubtedly further strengthen the relationship between the sect and the empire. Of course, the potential issue there was that Tang Wuling could make decisions that were beneficial to the Douluo Empire at at the expense of the Tang sect later on, but his decision wasn't absolute as the two palace masters would still step in when required. As such, this marriage would strengthen the Douluo Empire's trust in the Tang sect. It would complete this mission to perfection, and it would also bring the Tang sect a massive haul of resources. It really was a win-win situation. Furthermore, Tang Wuling had only just become the Tang sect master. If he could bring such a vast collection of benefits to the Tang sect, then that would naturally bolster his position as sect master as well. The smiling Douluo was very pleased with the direction that everything had taken. He had thought that there would be a heated debate, but it appeared things would conclude in a much smoother fashion than he had expected. He had observed all of the people who had accompanied Tang Wuling to the Douluo Empire, and he could tell that Long Yakshu had feelings for Tang Wuling, but it was a completely unrequited love. The 6 other members of Shrek's 7 monsters were all couples, and only Tang Wuling was presumably still single, which was perfect for this situation. At this moment, everyone was staring at Tang Wuling, waiting for his answer. If he were to agree to the proposal, then everyone would be happy. Dayuna had already cast aside her embarrassment and was staring at Tang Wuling with burning anticipation in her eyes. She was already prepared to dive right into his arms as soon as he agreed, even though doing so was clearly unbefitting of a princess like her. Tang Wuling raised his head, yet instead of turning to Dai Tianling, his gaze settled on Dayuna. He rose to his feet and appraised Dayuna with a complex look in his eyes while everyone looked on in silence. Yuna, Tang Wuling called out in a strained voice. Dayuna looked into his conflicted guilt-ridden eyes. His eyes were still so beautiful, even more so than the vast majority of women. However, they were no longer clearly visible to her as a film of tears had blurred her vision. When they had first met, she had played a trick on him and made him a laughing stock. After that, they had competed against one another over and over again, and in the end, he had led Shrek Academy to victory over what Dayuna had thought to be the invincible monster 8 kings. At the time, he had merely left a strong impression on her. The next time they met was in the Dragon Valley. She had been completely vulnerable and helpless, yet he had protected her time and time again. Over time, they had formed a seamless duo and advanced onward together. As they spent more time together, the image of him in her heart began to take on a rose-tinted quality. During that perilous situation, he had sent her out of the Dragon Valley, yet he hadn't made it and disappeared for 3 years. During those 3 years, Dayuna felt as if she were nothing more than a soulless husk, and even she didn't know how she managed to make it to the other side. After that, she received a news stating that he was still alive, and that he had returned to Shrek Academy. She had set everything aside to pursue him, and when she finally saw him again, she had courageously confessed to him during the Sea God Fate matchmaking convention, despite knowing that he and Yue most likely shared a very special relationship. However, what she had received at the time was an apologetic rejection, and the same expression appeared on his face once again. This was the expression that she least wanted to see. She didn't need his apology or sympathy. That wasn't what she wanted at all. Tears quickly welled up in her eyes, and even with her spirit eyes, her vision had completely blurred. She felt as if her heart had been wrenched away, leaving an excruciating hole in her chest. That's enough. I understand. Dayuna immediately turned before rushing outside. Tang Wuling reflexively took a step forward and opened his mouth to call out after her, but he couldn't bring himself to do so. Dai Tianling's smile had completely stiffened, and a look of thunderous fury immediately appeared in his eyes. NC's brows furrowed tightly, and Dayuan was clenching his fists as his face became flushed with rage. In contrast, the smiling Douluo was rather bemused. It seems that the princess had been rejected even though Tang Wuling had said nothing more than her name. The atmosphere in the rear palace immediately became extremely tense and hostile, and the smiling Douluo knew that this negotiation was most likely going to end in failure now. Tang Wuling had his own bottom line. For the sake of the sect, he could give up his life, but love was sacred. His heart had been entirely filled by Yuna, and there was no room in there for anyone else. Their love was already so brittle, and there were countless hardships ahead of them. He had already worked so hard, yet they still couldn't be together. How could he possibly accept love from someone else? If there were an alternate universe where he had met Dayuna first, then perhaps everything would have been different. However, even he who possessed the time reversal domain couldn't make it into a reality. Dayuna was a good person, and he truly didn't want to hurt her, but he had no choice. For a man of his status, polygamy would be more than warranted, but his heart simply wouldn't allow him to love more than one person. Dayuna, Long Yakshu, Wusijuo, all he could give them was an apology as he already had Yuna in his heart. Tang Wuling had already given his suit of 3-word battle armor the name Dragon Moon Song. The 3 words described his connection to the Dragon Clan, his love for Yuna, and his first soul spirit. All he wanted was for her to be constantly by his side every single day. They would live together, cook food together, take walks together, whisper into each other's ears. It was a simple wish, yet it was his greatest wish, and one that he had constantly been striving toward. Hurting Dayuna once again had further exacerbated his guilt, but there really was no helping the situation. Loving someone was painful, yet what was even more painful was for 2 people who clearly loved one another to be forced apart by circumstances. Sect Master, perhaps you misconstrued your intentions. The smiling Douluo asked in a low voice, finally breaking the tense silence. Tang Wuling turned to Hu Jie, and he knew what answer the smiling Douluo wanted him to give, but he still shook his head. His voice wasn't very loud, but it was very determined as he said, I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but I already have someone I love and have lost the right to marry Yuna. Chapter 1299. His words were spoken in a very apologetic manner, and he really was feeling very apologetic at the fact that he had to reject both the princess and the emperor in front of so many people. Dai Tianling's eyes were still filled with thunderous rage. There were indeed many objectives that could be achieved from this marriage, but most importantly, he just wanted his beloved daughter to be happy. However, he was greeted by the sight of his daughter's tears instead. His heart was burning with fury, and he wanted nothing better than to reduce Tang Wuling to ashes right away. As a father, any man who tried to approach his daughter would be met with enmity, but any man who dared to refuse his daughter would be met with burning fury. The veins on the backs of his hands were already bulging, and his aura was fluctuating in a rather unstable manner. Your Majesty, NC called out in a gentle voice. Dai Tianling turned toward him, and NC shook his head at him with a forlorn look in his eyes. When Long Yue and Dayuna had first come to him with the request of helping them in this matter, he had happily agreed as this was a good thing for the Douluo Empire. However, he didn't anticipate that this would be how the situation played out. Tang Wuling didn't even hesitate to think before he turned down the princess, which meant that there was no way that this marriage could take place. However, he was still a representative of the Tang sect, and for the sake of the empire, Dai Tianling couldn't afford to kill him, no matter how angry he was. Tang Wuling sat down again, and his brows were slightly furrowed. He didn't really know what to say at a time like this. A tense atmosphere settled over the entire rear palace, and Tang Wuling could clearly sense the burning fury in the eyes of Dai Yuan. He looked up in a resigned manner before turning to Dai Yuan with an apologetic expression. Dai Yuan harumphed coldly in response. Under different circumstances, he would have definitely already pounced on Tang Wuling. In the end, it was the smiling Douluo that broke the silence again. He cleared his throat to attract everyone's attention, then asked, Your Majesty, what is the bet you were referring to earlier? Dai Tianling appraised him in a cold manner, and replied, in ancient times, there was once a trial on the Douluo continent known as the Trial of 5 Gods. In a conflict between 2 nations, the weaker of the 2 could select one representative to take on 5 challenges from the more powerful nation, and if that person were to secure victory in all 5 challenges, then the more powerful nation would have to retreat, and no war could be instigated between the 2 nations for at least a year. The Douluo Empire reveres power, and even more so individual power. If the Tang sect can prove to us that Sect Master Tang is a true hero through this trial, then we can agree to the Tang sect's conditions. In the end, Dai Tianling had chosen to repress his own fury. After all, the safety of the empire hinged on this negotiation. Trial of 5 gods. Tang Wuling was immediately intrigued upon hearing this. It was undoubtedly the case that he would have to be the representative to face the 5 challenges. Dai Tianling continued, our Douluo Empire will send out 5 people to challenge Sect Master Tang in the disciplines of mechas, battle armor, soul skills, weapons, and soul spirits. If Sect Master Tang can secure victory in all 5 challenges, then like I said earlier, we'll accept all of the Tang sect's conditions and throw in an extra 10% on top of the total price. The smiling Douluo's brows furrowed tightly. Your Majesty, isn't that a little too harsh? With brother NC on the Empire's side, how is our Sect Master supposed to win all 5 challenges? Even though NC was the Douluo Empire's only limit Douluo, the Empire had countless talented individuals, so it certainly wouldn't be difficult to find 5 people who excelled in the aforementioned 5 disciplines. As such, Tang Wuling had virtually 0 chance of winning all 5 challenges. Dai Tianling rose to his feet and declared in a heavy voice, that's my decision, and I'm not changing it. If the Tang Sect Master can't fulfill this condition, then either remove the restriction clause from our deal or go back to where you came from. After that, he abruptly turned and strode away. Prior to Tang Wuling's rejection of Dayuna, he would have placed an age limit of 50 years old on the opponents that Tang Wuling would have to face during the trial trial of 5 gods. However, his daughter's heart had been broken, so he was determined to punish Tang Wuling, even if it would mean offending the Tang sect. The heavy iron laser gun was indeed very formidable, but the Douluo Empire was certainly no pushover, and Dai Tianling had never feared the Douluo Federation. Boss, I really have to commend you for standing up against oppression like that. Xu Lizzie said as he gave Tang Wuling a thumbs up. She chuckled. That's not right. He's clearly standing up against temptations. When you think about it, Dai Yuna is a good person, and she's a princess as well. You'd take her if you were in boss's position, wouldn't you? Yue Zhang, you asked. Of course. Not. Shishi immediately changed his tune after sensing the killing intent rising up behind him. You guys don't look nervous at all. The smiling Douluo was a lot less cheerful. Without any restrictions in place, the trial of 5 gods would be extremely difficult to complete. The most apparent obstacle that stood in Tang Wuling's way was none other than MC. MC was a limit Douluo, and his martial soul was the holy radiant dragon. He was simply an insurmountable opponent. Whole Master Hu, you should have more confidence. After all, he even managed to last a while against you, didn't he? What's so scary about this trial of 5 gods? Shishi chuckled. You have that much confidence in him? The smiling Douluo asked in a surprised manner. Well, he's destined to lose, so why wouldn't we have confidence? Shishi replied. The smiling Douluo didn't know what to say to that. Xu Xiao and harumphed coldly. They've gone way too far here. What kind of bet is this? It's just an impossible condition that's as good as a rejection. Yuan and Yui said, looks like we'll need to consider our backup plans. His Majesty clearly isn't willing to listen to reason. Tang Wuling looked at everyone and said, looks like none of you think I can win the trial of 5 gods. Everyone immediately nodded without any hesitation. Yue Zhang said, the Douluo Empire is definitely going to send out 1 limit Douluo and 4 hyper Douluo. How are you supposed to win? Unless they enforce an age restriction. This is simply an impossible task. On top of that, the 5 challenges will take place on successive days back to back. There's just no way. The smiling Douluo sighed. I'll contact the amorous Douluo to see if we can make some compromises in our conditions. After all, our ultimate objective here is to prevent the war from happening. Yi Xinglan said, it looks like that's our only option. I didn't think the Douluo Empire would pull something like this on us. Arahang rubbed his own large bald head. What a pity. Perhaps junior disciple brother would be able to win this trial of 5 gods in 5 more years. There's no need for 5 more years. I want to try it now. Tang Wuling suddenly said. Everyone immediately fell silent upon hearing this. This was clearly an impossible task. You can't, Captain. You represent the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. You. An urgent look appeared on Yi Xinglan's face. Even though she didn't finish her sentence, it was quite clear what she intended to say. Tang Wuling couldn't afford to lose as his loss would equate to a loss for the Tang sect, and for Shrek Academy as well. No matter how supremely talented he was, there was no way he could defeat a limit Douluo in just his early 20s. They simply weren't even on the same level. Tang Wuling said in a determined manner. It's exactly because I represent the Tang sect and Shrek Academy that I can't back down. Back when we were last here in the Douluo Empire, we had also been convinced that we would lose to the Monster 8 Kings. However, we still did our best, and in the end, we created a miracle. That's not a fair comparison. On this occasion, it's you up against the power of an entire empire. This is not some youth tournament. Yuan and Yui countered. Tang Wuling insisted. I want to try it. Even if I lose all 5 matches, I'll see it through to the end. Whole Master Hu, contact His Majesty, the amorous Douluo, in the meantime, and work out a backup plan. At the very least, this trial of 5 gods will buy us 5 days of time. Perhaps this will be the greatest challenge I will ever face, and it's also a rare opportunity for me that may never come again. Chapter 1300. Hu Jie's brows furrowed tightly. Are you sure you want to take on this bet? The Douluo Empire is definitely going to be broadcasting the matches to as wide an audience as possible. There's no shame in losing at your age, but I'm concerned that losing will traumatize you and hinder your future cultivation progress. That would be catastrophic. Tang Wuling turned to the smiling Douluo with a serious look on his face. When I was 10, I finally saved up enough money to buy my first soul spirit and cultivated to rank 10 in soul power. At the time, I was just a nobody with the most mediocre blue silver brass martial soul. However, I never gave up hope. After I went to the spirit pagoda, I was told that the money I'd saved up would only be enough for 1 lottery pick. I didn't have exceptional luck. My luck was exceptionally bad. If anything, I picked a defective soul spirit that may not even be able to bring me any soul skills. Even so, I fused with it and continued to work hard in my cultivation. At the time, my rate of cultivation was slower than everyone else, and I could only progress at a snail's pace. I put in hard work and dedication that was unimaginable to the average person to make it into Shrek Academy. And now, here I am today. Failure has never been able to break me. It's only acted as motivation for me to continue to advance onward. The trial of 5 gods is just another obstacle that's been thrown my way, and I'll take on all 5 challenges, even if it means losing 5 out of 5 times. I'm sure that this will be an important stepping stone for me to reach greater heights. Everyone fell silent upon hearing this, and Hu Jie looked into Tang Wuling's eyes, only to see a fiery yearning for battle. All right, but I have to inform the amorous Douluo of this, and I must ask you to remember at all times that you are currently representing the Tang sect. The smiling Douluo said in a serious manner. Tang Wuling replied, it is of the utmost honor to me that I am able to represent the Tang sect, and I will give everything I have to defend the honor of the Tang sect. His birth father was the founder of the Tang sect, and his goal was to follow in his father's footsteps to find the divine realm. There was virtually no chance for him to complete the trial, but Tang Wuling firmly believed that the experience would bestow upon him many things that he wouldn't be able to attain from cultivation alone. In stark contrast with the warm and grand welcome they'd received when arriving at the palace, their departure was a very sullen and cold affair. Even Dai Yuan hadn't come out to accompany them, clearly still enraged by Tang Wuling's rejection toward Dai Yuna. After returning to the headquarters, Shrek's 7 monsters went back to rest, while Hu Jie arrived at the information transference hub and made an intercontinental call. As soon as the call was connected, the amorous Douluo's lazy voice rang out from the other end. What is it, old man Hu? Vice Palace Master, we've had a bit of a situation here in the Douluo Empire. Thus, Hu Jie delivered a brief recount of events, and Zhang Xin allowed him to speak uninterrupted before finally heaving a faint sigh at the conclusion of his story. That's a pity. Indeed it is, but the sect master can't be blamed for this. No one could have anticipated that such a curveball would be thrown at us, and things like love and relationships can't be forced. Besides, it would be an even greater sign of disrespect if the sect master were to accept the princess's feelings without actually reciprocating them. Hu Jie sighed. The amorous Douluo suddenly burst into laughter on the other end. Are you defending the sect master, old man Hu? That's not like you at all. I didn't think you would acknowledge the sect master so easily. Hu Jie replied. I've acknowledged him due to the power he's displayed, and what he did in the Dou Spirit Empire. I've been wanting to stomp the Spirit Pagoda into the ground for a long time, and the sect master accomplished that over at the Dou Spirit Empire. It was really satisfying just for me to hear about it. Getting back on topic, the situation in the Douluo Empire will be rather troublesome. Do you have any backup plans, Vice Palace Master? The amorous Douluo replied. Why are you asking me? You're with the sect master, and he's calling all the shots. Huh? Hu Jie faltered slightly upon hearing this. Both he and Li Yang were under the impression that Tang Wuling was still essentially just a trainee sect master, while the 2 Douluo Palace Masters were the ones truly in power. Zhang Xin said in a serious voice, remember this, old man Hu, you have to maintain a necessary level of respect toward the sect master at all times. Cao Daja and I have both placed our trust in him, so his decisions are the equivalent to the decisions of the Tang sect. Even we wouldn't disobey his orders. He wasn't chosen by us, he was chosen by the heavens. In the future, it's very likely that he'll reach dizzying heights that are unimaginable to us. As for the trial of 5 gods, if the sect master wants to participate in it, then of course he can. When I said that's a pity, I was referring to the fact that I wouldn't be there to see the trial in person. Trust in our sect master. So what if he loses? Who hasn't lost in battle before? Don't you think that we should be proud of having a sect master with the courage to oppose an entire empire like this? The trial of 5 gods is the ultimate trial that has only ever taken place between nations since its inception in ancient times. The fact that the Douluo Empire is proposing this trial of 5 gods indicates that they see our Tang sect as equals. From this perspective, this is also a good thing. Zhang Xin paused momentarily here before continuing. On top of that, even in the worst case scenario, we can give up on the restriction clause. Those weapons have the potential to turn the tables in the short term, but they're all disposable items that can only be used for a single war. They're not going to be enough for the Douluo Empire to retaliate and invade the Federation. The restriction clause was mostly put in place as a display of our attitude, and the sect master is aware of this. So let him do as he pleases. Haha, even the Atlas Douluo has never had the honor of participating in a trial of 5 gods before. Everyone expects him to fail, so we have nothing to lose. But if he wins 1 or 2 of the 5 challenges, then that would bring immense glory to our Tang sect. The smiling Douluo was instantly enlightened upon hearing this. All right, I understand now. In that case, I won't have to worry about anything. I think there's a very good chance that our sect master will be able to win 1 or 2 challenges. With his time reversal spiritual domain and those time-based abilities, even NC would have to be wary of him. After all, at his age, if he were to lose a few years of his life, he would be close to getting buried 6 feet under. Haha, wait, what's this about a time reversal domain? Zhang Xin asked. Huh? You don't know about this? The smiling Douluo asked in a surprised manner. That's our sect master's spiritual domain. It's truly incredible that he was able to manifest a spiritual domain at such a young age. It makes me feel like I've been squandering my life away. Even now, I still haven't been able to manifest a spiritual domain, and it's precisely because of this that I haven't managed to take that final step. The amorous Douluo fell silent. What is it, Vice Palace Master? Is there something wrong? Hu Jie asked. The amorous Douluo sighed. I don't want to dent your confidence any further, but our sect master has only been at the spirit domain realm for just over a year, and prior to leaving the Douluo continent, he still hadn't manifested a spiritual domain. Time reversal, eh? Haha, that's fantastic. The smiling Douluo suddenly couldn't bring himself to laugh anymore. Where the hell did you two find a freak like him? Other soul masters like us should just kill ourselves at this point. The amorous Douluo chuckled. Do you understand why we decided to make him the sect master now? Prior to the Atlas Douluo's passing, he had already passed on the position of Sea God's Pavilion Master to him. If we hadn't acted as quickly as we did, we would have been permanently one-upped by Shrek Academy. If it isn't for the fact that Shrek Academy has to rely on our Tang sect for their future rebuild, the Light Dark Douluo wouldn't even have agreed to this arrangement, so we're actually immensely fortunate to have been able to make him our sect master, not the other way around. A smile reappeared on Hu Jie's face upon hearing this. All right, I understand everything now. Rest assured, I'll protect our sect master with everything I have and ensure that he returns safe and sound. This sect master of ours really does have an immeasurable future ahead of him. If things continue like this, he's definitely going to eclipse the likes of the Atlas Douluo. Speaking of that, he's attracting just as much attention from the opposite sex as the Atlas Douluo once did. The amorous Douluo heaved a resigned sigh. This is what happens when a man is too exceptional. It can't be helped. By the way, on the topic of the Atlas Douluo, one of the 4 heavenly monarchs of the Holy Spirit cult turned to the dark side because of him. Do you still remember the Phoenix sisters? Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.